Hello and welcome to this culminating edition of the Weekly Brief, and we are calling it the Year-End Brief. And 2025 draws to a close. What a fabulous year it's been. Incredible, some would call it. And it all started right on 20th of Jan when US President Donald Trump assumed the Oval Office for the second time as President of United States. And oh my God, these last 12 months have been fairly fabulous, haven't they? So let's put this all in context. What a year 2025 has been, and what should we look forward to in 2026? Now, let's begin this show in a slightly different avatar. Let's not do it as a regular podcast. Let's actually get some inspiration from Amitabh Bachchan on KBC, should we? Let's break down today's conversation into critical questions that were answered or remained unanswered even as we are here in December 2025. So, आप तैयार हैं लॉक करने के लिए अपने जवाब पहले पढ़ाव के लिए? Should we get started, gentlemen?
लॉक किया जाएगा.
All right. And for those of you who are still a little uninitiated, of course, I am Kartik Malhotra and joined today by our Sridharan, editor International TV9 Network, and Rakesh, Khar, editor News 9. So, the first question, gentlemen, for the year 2025. Let's begin with geopolitics. If you were to look at 2025 as a year gone by, who in your respective minds is the biggest winner of 2025? And the options on your screen right now. The biggest winner of 2025, Donald Trump, Xi Jinping, Volodymyr Putin, or Benjamin Netanyahu? Shri, why don't you have a go?
Donald Trump, Kartik, because I think, like you said, since the time this gentleman was sworn in January, I think we are living in a world that is shaped by Trump on a daily basis, whether it is in terms of his policies or daily pronouncements on social truth. And the world has really been upended in many ways, be it his tariff approach or his alignment with old allies, which have stood the test of time since the end of Second World War. Canada to Europe, the dictators are no longer, such a bad word in American politics. Kim Jong-un, for example, of North Korea, or even or even Vladimir Putin. There's a new understanding or sympathy that the U.S. this administration is attaching. So, in every way, whether it's technology, climate change, drill baby drill, everything that affects us on a daily basis is now being shaped by Trump. So my vote is for Trump.
All right. Trump for Shri. Rakesh, but a lot of Trump's policies, some would argue, have not really given the kind of impetus to the US economy as they could have. And one of the reasons why Trump said that, one of his favorite words in the dictionary is tariff. And those tariffs were, at least our understanding in the newsroom was, that those tariffs were being implemented to hurt China. And look at China. China has closed the year with $1 trillion of trade surplus. Most of its shipments actually headed to the US. So would you agree that Donald Trump has been the winner of the year, or would it rather be Xi Jinping?
I would bet for Xi Jinping because, Trump has been the biggest newsmaker indeed. She's right in naming him as the
I think not a single news bulletin has gone without mentioning Donald Trump since 20th
None of our podcasts, none of the economists cover, New York Times, every day, everywhere, Trump is all over. I think he's suffering from serial hallucination and serial hysteria. So, when you have these two, afflictions, you know what the result could be.
Right.
I don't think, all his, policies that have been intended to make America great again, MAGA, it will lead America to that destination.
Okay.
So I have my serious doubts. I mean, look at, you mentioned China's, economic strength. And look at even the tariffs have not been able to hit India's exports to US. They've increased, despite this is the latest story that we've seen today.
Yeah.
So, Trump, yes, the biggest newsmaker, but the biggest gainer is the Chinese head, because he is, in three formulations. He's now being looked at as G1.
Right.
Then he's G1 plus 1,
right.
And then G5 as well,
right.
which includes India as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, I just wanted to draw your point that I think you missed out maybe, by you wanted to make it more global and you left out India.
Okay.
The fastest growing major
We have enough questions on India also, but sure, complete your point.
No, but I think, the viewer would not be really very kind to whatever, the way we have structured it.
Sure.
The largest, fastest growing major economy in a row, and politically, one of the few politicians to have, reversed the setback of 2024 elections, 6 state wins and growing stronger.
All right. So, well, that option was not on our list, but Rakesh says that it was off menu. But Rakesh says that perhaps it's Prime Minister Modi. But Rakesh, just to sort of conclude this point, one would argue that India was supposed to stitch that trade deal with the US by fall of 2025. We are already in winter of 2025, kissing distance of 2026. We don't have a trade deal with the US.
So was US supposed to do it? Why only looking
Sure,
India as
US was supposed to do it as well. But I'm saying we don't have the trade deal with the. We have been pressurized into cutting our Russian oil imports. I mean, like it or not, those sanctions imposed by US President Donald Trump on those two oil companies in Russia have, in a sense...
I think if 2025 is the year in review, then for 10 months we have done what we did with Russia, hurting US.
Yeah, sure. But I'm saying at the end of the day, we have given into some pressure.
But and
US has not yet sort of, conceded ground, and we still continue to face those 50% tariffs. So not just geopolitically, but even diplomatically, do you think India could have gotten that win with the US, which, if you remember, Prime Minister Modi was the first state head of any country to visit the United States and meet President Donald Trump?
I think there are merits and demerits of having the deal on the table in the stipulated time frame. That we missed the time frame. But look at what Putin said. India is, and Modi is the only leader who has really stood up to the American pressure and has not signed the deal, including the relaxations they want on the food and agriculture piece.
All right, sure.
So just to add to that, Kartik, I think what's more important than a self-set deadline is possibly getting a deal that works for India. So there are some non-negotiables from our government's perspective, and there are certain hard lines that US has also drawn.
Sure.
I think for India, the hard line is obviously the agriculture, like how much of agricultural produce do you allow from US.
That's right.
So that's a non-negotiable, and I think we'll work on that and get a deal that works for us. So
absolutely.
There's no harm.
But continuing to play devil's advocate here, there is a greater ramification of the trade deal not coming through, and that is something which is hurting the Indian economy as well. Look at how the Indian rupee has depreciated. Why is the Indian rupee depreciating? That's because of the massive outflows of foreign portfolio investors, who are all waiting for that trade deal to happen. The US economy is not getting hurt as much as the Indian stock markets, the Indian currency is depreciating. So all of that in context, geopolitically, diplomatically, India would have been in a far better position had that trade deal come through. But that trade deal has not come through, and US may be suffering on account of inflation, but it hasn't imported as much inflation as people expected it to. So do you still go by your argument that perhaps the biggest winner of this year is Prime Minister Modi?
No, he's not the big. I said you should have counted him in. I didn't mention him as the number one.
So what is your pick? If you come back to the questions on the screen right now, Xi Jinping for you?
Yeah, G1, G1 plus 1,
right.
G5.
Right. So Xi Jinping is Rakesh's sort of choice for this answer, for this question, and Sri happens to believe it is Donald Trump. But let's not ignore
the point of view, definitely.
Yeah, let's not ignore the other two names also on the screen, and we'll just spend 30 seconds discussing those. Volodymyr Putin, historic visit to India, and in all likelihood, that peace deal, whenever it happens between Russia and Ukraine, is more likely to favor Russia than Ukraine, given the fact that Russia may get access to Ukrainian territory, which was always the objective ever since the war broke out in 2022. And add to that, of course, Ukraine is not going to get NATO membership. So isn't the ball sort of shifting in favor of Vladimir Putin?
So, Kartik, I think that Putin has definitely got an upper hand in the Russia-Ukraine situation, but it's largely because US is allowing to gain that upper hand. So that's what I was referring to earlier, that because of Trump, what would have been a non-negotiable for US, like Russia is a sworn enemy of US for the longest time. But with Trump in the White House, there's a new perspective which the US foreign policy is adopting in terms of how they view Putin as well.
Right.
So I think US is willing to look at Russia and its aspirations, and also not condemn it as a back to a Cold War status.
All right.
On Putin, Kartik, the most important part, he obviously, he was here in India and we had a historic visit, and we played him as one of the leaders who is largely acceptable to the world,
Right.
But the point is that Russia's internal economy is in not great shape.
Absolutely.
So that's a major cause for worry.
And the final name on the list is Benjamin Netanyahu. That fragile peace in the Middle East is holding, at least for now, as things stand. There is some sort of a peace already in place, and the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu has said that a two-state solution is not a solution, and despite Western pressure, Palestine continues to not be recognized as a state. So that's the final as we come to the end of the first question on this year-end edition.
30 seconds, as the year closes by, the attack in Sydney on a particular community reinforces the larger ideological point that Israel makes.
Absolutely.
Peace will always be fragile.
That's right.
Okay, so on to the next Padhav, as Amitabh Bachchan says, doesn't he? So let's move on now from winners to potentially, if we can use that term, with some discretion, the biggest losers of 2025 when it comes to political leaders. And on your screen, here are the options that we have come out with. Is it Volodymyr Zelenskyy as the biggest loser, hasn't really been able to gain as much as he would have liked to with the intervention of US as well as European leaders? Does it happen to be Mark Carney, who was sworn in as Prime Minister of Canada this year, while India-Canada relations have sort of thawed a little ever since Justin Trudeau exited, but not much headway when it comes to the economy of Canada? Would it be Lula da Silva, the Prime Minister of Brazil, the President of Brazil, I beg your pardon, or would it be Cyril Ramaphosa? Remember what Donald Trump did to Cyril Ramaphosa when he visited White House and thereafter boycotting G20. So, I mean, these are big stories. In fact, all four names here have been at some level at the receiving end in 2025. So, Rakesh, let me start with you this time. Biggest loser in your mind of 2025?
Zelenskyy, without doubt. He's, waging a losing battle from day one. I don't know why he's at it. Okay. There's no ideological context. There is a territorial context. But then, having lost so much, and then he was fighting the war on support from a lot of external factors. It was not his own war, and he is, I think to my mind, making his own people suffer endlessly.
So do you think Donald Trump is also sort of playing this game because he is providing those drones and the Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine to continue fighting that war with Russia, and at the same time trying to negotiate a peace process which is not likely working out in favor of Zelenskyy?
So if you look at within Ukraine, I don't think Zelenskyy is a loser because he still has a high popularity with his voters and with his citizens. I think the real loser to my mind in this list is possibly Lula da Silva.
Okay.
Because he's the archetypical, rags to riches story in Brazilian politics. Like, barely literate, worker, became the president, went through conviction, spent time in jail, has now, dramatically come back as the president in 2023. And then he's also gone after his, his rivals, Jair Bolsonaro, which has also upset President Trump. And I think now people of Brazil are beginning to realize that maybe the policies that Lula is now implementing, especially on the geopolitical front, like antagonizing US. Inflation has gone up in Brazil. There's a scandal which has rocked his government, especially in terms of the pension fund scandal, which some of his officials are. His minister had to resign. The fund head was sacked.
Right.
So I think,
and the only large enough economy which continues to be slapped with the 50% tariffs.
Exactly.
That's right.
So that's what the people are really upset about, the inflation in Brazil. So that's really what is hurting them. Even if I look at Cyril Ramaphosa, while Trump might be upset with South Africa for persecuting white farmers, but the fact is within South Africa he's still popular. He's still the leader. So in this list, to my mind, if you look at who's the biggest loser internally, it'll have to be Lula da Silva to my mind.
All right, Lula da Silva is the choice that Sri is locking on this show today, but Rakesh still sticking with Zelenskyy.
I'm sticking with Zelenskyy, and also I don't think Ramaphosa rightly is placed here because he is not a loser. I mean, the whole world is betting on the South African economy, its potential, including India. And India has made a lot of investments led by the Prime Minister. And of course, if Trump didn't come to G20, it doesn't matter. G20 was, on course.
But the fact that Ramaphosa is not going to be extended the invite to attend G20 in Miami, Florida next year, is that a diplomatic mistake that Trump could be potentially making?
Never know, he could just resign his own earlier decision and finally invite him.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on now to question number 3 on your screens. Now, the country that quietly gained the most leverage in 2025. Options on your screen now. Syria, Saudi Arabia, China or Israel? Sri, your turn.
My vote is for Saudi Arabia for many reasons. One, I think under Mohammed bin Salman or MBS, the country is really transforming itself on multiple fronts.
Okay.
If you look at some of the biggest deals that have happened, the football diplomacy, for example,
right.
the Public Investment Fund, which is Saudi's main vehicle for investment. It's got on board people like Ronaldo, Neymar.
Right.
If you look at the acquisition they're making, Electronic Arts, a $55 billion deal, now 97% owned by Saudi.
Investments in artificial intelligence, cloud infrastructure.
And 2034 FIFA World Cup, they back the rights as well.
That's right.
So I think it's a dramatic transfer. And let me not forget the most important is it's also the mediator in the whole Middle East.
That's right.
Whether it is the Palestine and Israel issue, it's at the center of the negotiation, or even the Iran issue.
Right.
Saudi is actually leading and emerging as the power in that structure.
Right.
And I think it's gaining a lot of power thanks to MBS. And also, at the same time, it's also modernizing.
Right.
Apart from like retaining and transforming its own, perception as an Islamic country,
right.
A hardline Islamic country, it is like becoming more and more modern. Starting 2026, foreigners will be allowed to own land in
right.
Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So these are dramatic transformations that are, happening thanks to MBS in Saudi
Arabia.
Arabia.
That the question around leverage would not actually come from oil. It would actually come from, some call it sports washing, but yeah, you're calling it a pivot. But
correct.
Sports washing, tech washing, investments into the US.
Economic forecasting.
So to your point,
investments.
Saudi Arabia's GDP is now less dependent on oil exports than other services.
Right. Absolutely.
So it's economic forecast. I agree, economic forecasting, but I would leave China out again because if we have put him as number one in the first question, how could we not?
You
cannot?
Put him as we did put
I put him. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm happy US is not here in the games.
US has the most leverage, doesn't it? Anyway, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's over leveraging itself to that extent.
Right.
I think,
but what's your pick?
My pick is Saudi Arabia because it represents a relatively modern and forward-looking progressive face of a Muslim country in the first sense, and it is looking at talent from across the world, including India, is looking at becoming the most acceptable, currency in terms of geopolitics and geo-economics for the world at large. Of course, the deal with Pakistan may not be comfortable to India, but in larger sense, it is a country that India is invested in.
Yeah.
It's a country that the world looks forward, including its ability to push the sports and as a weapon of soft washing, if you call it, whatever term we use here.
All right.
And she would use burnishing, sports burnishing. So in that sense, I think it's made a lot of strides in a very forward-looking manner.
Saudi Arabia happens to be the choice that both of you for a change.
A rare consensus.
Yeah, a rare consensus. So Saudi Arabia potentially gets selected as the country with the maximum leverage. But just to also highlight, one cannot discount the role of China in using its leverage as the manufacturing, as a factory of the world, and continues to have, like I mentioned, $1 trillion of trade surplus, shipping like crazy to everybody, including the United States of America. And let's not also forget Syria. I mean, ever since the fall of the Assad regime and al-Shara becoming the president, with his Al-Qaeda history now being received in the Oval Office, meeting President Donald Trump and sort of, sharing that bonhomie, is that a sign of further changes to come in Middle Eastern politics and in the context of how US has historically viewed
I'm not as
Syria?
optimistic, Kartik, because, completely cutting off the roots, the umbilical cord to, the hardcore fundamentalist Islam is going to be very, very difficult.
Right.
So in that sense, the current format might present a very modern looking face and acceptance, but where the origins are.
All right.
If I were to add another country from that region, Kartik, which probably is like gaining significant
UAE.
global UAE.
Yeah. Again, you're on the same page.
Yeah. Right. So, along with Saudi, I think UAE. So these are two very important countries
So fair to assume
which are transforming that part of the world.
Massive investments in technology, diversification from traditional sources of energy exports is pretty much the key to development and leverage in the Middle East right now.
Yeah.
All right, with that, gentlemen, with your permission, let's now move on to the next question on your screens, ladies and gentlemen. And this is question number 4. The most powerful economic weapon of 2025. And interesting options in front of us, aren't there? Chips control, backfired. Tariff, sanctions, we don't know the efficacy. Visa curbs, yes, it did make headlines through the year. And digital regulation, a lot has been done in India, even though the government had to withdraw it, but Australia pretty much setting the tone for digital regulation. So in your opinion, gentlemen, Rakesh, let me begin this time with you. The biggest economic weapon of 2025, what would it be?
I don't know what results would it cause, but tariffs and sanctions is the biggest weapon, without doubt to my mind.
Okay.
And I guess I would have added, in addition to the points that you mentioned, is critical materials and minerals.
All right, critical minerals is
And
definitely,
material,
it has been weaponized,
Tariffs
Right.
because, curb on exports would come out of the
I mean, it would come as part of the trade, but
Yeah.
it's not. It's essentially emerging as a one
Right.
big ticket window that
So
China again has an advantage
Sure.
on.
So to go back to your selection as tariffs and sanctions as the biggest economic weapon, yes, tariffs were weaponized and sanctions were weaponized, but did it cause the kind of destruction that it was expected to cause?
No, it didn't. As I mentioned in the right away when we were discussing Donald Trump.
Right.
But a unilateral decision disrupting the world order. As it is, it's not a perfect world order, right from WTO to UNICEF to WHO.
Right.
But then if there is one person who's disrupting it all in one go, it's tariffs.
That's the sledgehammer and the chainsaw that we also saw,
And,
visuals of
we
the
do
year.
expect the Supreme Court in US to adjudicate on this entire issue of tariffs in the next few
Hopefully
days.
in the month of Jan, yes, we should see that
early
that
Jan
ruling
is
coming
the,
in.
yeah, so
Right. Okay.
But
Do you agree?
I absolutely agree because that's a broad brush which impacts everything. Everything else that you mentioned, for example, visa curbs, chip control or digital regulation, everything can be brought under this umbrella of tariffs. So that's essentially what Trump has done, right? I mean, he used his IEEPA powers to unilaterally impose tariffs on multiple countries, all trading partners, and that has now become the weapon of choice for policymakers around the world. So on your point about why aren't we seeing any impact yet, I think the transmission takes time. It's not magic that if you impose tariffs, either the supplier takes the cost or the buyer takes the cost. There is no third option, right? I don't think you can become efficient so quickly overnight to be able to absorb 25, 30 or 50% of your tariffs on any items. So I think we will see the transmission happening next year. So we'll come to that. I see that there you have a question on that as well. So we'll tackle that when we come to it.
Sure. One quick follow-up. In your mind, had the US not given in to the export and easing the exports of NVIDIA H200 chips to China, then would you have changed your selection? Because tariffs, independent of tariffs, was this entire AI race that we saw in 2025 that US was preventing China from even competing in, leave alone whoever came out as the winner. So had US President Donald Trump not backed down on export of H200s to China, would you have still selected tariffs?
I still would have. Just talking specifically on the H200s, Kartik. Now, China is saying we don't want them. As I wrote recently for News9.
But China also then changed its position, Sri,
That's right.
because you have Alibaba and ByteDance now
Exactly.
saying,
There's a
placing
range
those
of
large-scale orders and NVIDIA needing to really, increase its output.
Absolutely. But, when you impose such restrictions on a country, especially like China, which already has a thriving AI ecosystem, they are investing much more money than almost every other country except the US. What you're doing is accelerating China's own capabilities in terms of chip building. Huawei is no rollover, right? Huawei is building chips which can do, when you deny these high-end compute power to China, they'll figure out a way to make their software more efficient. Like, how do you go, use inferring, for example, to build your AI models, which is what we saw with DeepSeek.
Absolutely right.
So,
I mean,
I don't think it's such a very powerful weapon, if you ask me, compared to tariffs, because then that hurts everything. It hurts a whole lot of suppliers, not just a specific company.
Kartik, from people-to-people perspective, visa curbs is a hugely powerful weapon
I was just gonna come to that.
because it impacts people directly,
Right.
and it also reimagines America probably in the wrong way, if I'm right about it, that it was the capital of talent.
Absolutely.
Now, by design and by policy statement in a public domain, it says I don't welcome talent. Though it doesn't say it as much, but that's the import.
Absolutely.
But I have a different take on that. I think US may still surprise us by putting in place a visa system which takes away the lottery, which kills the lottery system and prioritizes meritocracy, which is how it should be. So they might actually make it easier for STEM graduates to remain in the US and contribute to the economy.
Yeah, in public perception,
I don't think
what
it's
happens
a
is that,
position
talent should
turn
be
away
without
global talent is my
I know.
point.
But in public perception, as of today, it's with caveats.
Yes.
Then it's not welcome.
Absolutely. And add to that, of course, it's not just STEM graduates that US wants to attract. US, in fact, wants to attract the richest people in the world who are willing to
So that's
buy
a paradigm
that $1 billion
shift. It's
visa.
a pivot, not
It's a
for
bit
the right.
of a sham right now because because visa is something only the Congress is, or the immigration laws are something only the Congress is empowered to, pass.
But Trump,
So even if you take the $1 million ticket, you have to come through the same process, which is the EB1 or EB5
that's right.
process.
It's a bit of a Shylock mentality.
Yeah. Fair enough. Let's move on now with this on to question number 5 on this year-end brief. And this one is the no big deal of 2025. Well, 2025 was slated to be this year where a lot of big deal decisions were supposed to come out or trends were supposed to get established. So this question is actually about, did some of these hypotheses turn out to be no big deals really? So the first one is US inflation. I mean, US inflation, yes, it has inched up slightly, but still, I mean, there was enough room for Fed Reserve to go ahead and cut interest rates. So not really pinching the US consumer as much as one assumed it would. The other no big deal was China's slowdown. I mean, doomsday scenario, China is not going to pick up, it's not going to maintain its 5% growth rate, and the property sector, which has been crashing, and this entire bubble around China plus one, manufacturing moving out of China, none of that has really, happened in 2025. China continues to be as resilient a player as it has been historically. The India-US trade deal, no big deal, no deal at all. I mean, we are end of the year and there is no deal. And the last one, AI bubble, something that started making news towards the end of 2025 that, hey, AI could be in bubble territory, overheated, valuations supremely high, but none of these really happen to become big deals of 2025. So in your mind, Sri, which is the biggest no big deal of 2025?
So far, I would say it's US inflation.
Okay.
Because logically, one would have expected the shop prices of all imported items to just shoot up because you impose these tariffs. We've not seen that happen, partly because the exporters have absorbed a lot of the cost. And maybe in some sense, the American consumers also, down buying their, consumption in terms of like eschewing the more expensive one and buying a cheaper substitute.
Right.
But I do see the inflation trickle down happening eventually, Kartik. Next year, I think it'll be in full blown. That's unfortunately when for Donald Trump also the midterm elections are going to happen.
Right.
So that's a big scare. So we might actually see an unwinding of some of the tariffs in next year, especially once the US Supreme Court also rules on this issue. If it says that this is ultra wise, that he did not have the powers to announce these tariffs or impose these tariffs, then we will see these tariffs go away literally.
Right.
Then the other route available to him is to go to Congress and get the tariffs passed there.
That's right.
So next year, we might see this no big deal even like
Become a big deal potentially in 2026?
before it actually,
Right.
it dies down, yeah.
Kartik, many of these items actually fall in the, they're in transit.
Right.
They evolved in 2025,
Right.
including
Right.
AI bubble.
Right.
So, we've just started talking about it.
Sure.
Today, Richard Sharma wrote a piece, on these 4 O's: overweight, overexposed, overleveraged. So, these might actually come true in the first half of 2026.
But
so,
at the close of 2025, if you were to sort of pick one of these, which according to you has been
difficult choice to
no
my
big
mind.
deal at all?
I mean, I think, China slowed down to my mind because, we began with the housing market crash. We began with less than 5% growth. We began with Chinese businesses being hounded out. All that is history, though we don't have full clarity because they run behind curtains. So, but on the public, in the public domain, what we know is that China is doing handsomely well across domains, manufacturing, new technologies, AI, chips, critical material. So in that sense, China's story is more than intact.
Although I think as per the recent economic conference, which the Politburo has held, they're talking of, the need to stimulate domestic consumption.
And reforms being expected
I mean,
from the
domestic
Chinese
consumption
government.
is a bit of a challenge.
Exactly. So
there.
they can't be forever an export-driven
Or at least
economy.
2025,
Yeah.
at least we haven't seen enough data to suggest that China has indeed slowed down, and the China slowdown was potentially, in your mind, one of the biggest
That's right.
no big deals.
And you're right. I mean, you have
Yes,
listed
yeah.
India-US trade deal right at the start of the year. I wrote myself that probably India would be the first country to sign a deal. I've been proved grossly wrong.
Absolutely. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of part 1 of the year-end brief. And after the break, we'll come to some India-specific questions and we'll also talk about what to expect in 2026. Time for a very short break. Come back after.